Hi guys, and welcome back to the latest video. The newest chapter of Four Nights of the Apocalypse, Chapter 1, has finally been translated, and as y'all know, I am a huge Seven Deadly Sins fan, so reading the sequel is everything that I've been wanting for these past few months after I heard the release date would be January 27th. So, in today's video, we're going to be covering Chapter 1 of what happens in the Four Nights of the Apocalypse, and it isn't necessarily what I expected. So, starting off, the chapter starts off and we see a young child named Percival running, and he sees a stone bird flying in the sky, and he tells his grandfather about it. The grandfather then picks up a pitchfork and throws it at the bird and pierces it, and the bird immediately dies. While the bird is falling, Percival jumps off a seemingly small cliff and catches the bird while it's falling to its death. But the grandfather runs to the edge of the cliff to see, in fact, it was not a small cliff, but a very steep one at that. However, Percival, while falling, grabs some slab and he's able to pull himself up along with the bird. We then see Percival and his grandfather slice up this very large bird, and him and his grandfather chow down on this bird, and his grandfather tells him to eat and grow up even bigger than himself. Mind you, the grandfather is a very large man, and they seem to be living in a small house in an area very secluded from other people. We don't see any other people at all in this area they're at. After the meal, Percival and his grandfather say they're going to burn off the meal, and they go outside to train together. And of course, the grandfather is shirtless, and he is absolutely jacked, like, not Escanor jacked, but he's almost there. He's huge. During this training, Percival dodges his grandfather's attack, and he's able to hit him in the stomach while telling his grandfather that he's going to beat him this time. But the grandfather grabs him and throws him into the ground, defeating Percival. The grandfather then leaves to go wash their plates in the lake, and he reflects on how fast his grandson has grown up. While washing these plates, something takes him by surprise, and we see him running out of the area, and he says something completely slipped his mind. And immediately he goes to Percival, running to him and telling him that his birthday is tomorrow. Percival's 16th birthday is tomorrow, and it seems Percival is completely clueless to this fact and unsure of his age and when his birthday even was. And I don't think it's anything to do with amnesia of any kind, but rather Percival just doesn't care about those type of things such as a birthday or dates or any of that. He's kind of a spacehead in terms of those things. However, what excited Percival about the fact that his birthday was tomorrow was that he could possibly drink with his grandpa. Very obviously, Percival and his grandfather have an extremely close relationship. They seem to have only each other in this world, and they seem extremely happy with that, extremely satisfied, like they're not longing for anything else. It's really, really wholesome to see. We then see his grandfather lead him up a large hill to show him something, and we see that they are standing far above the clouds. So geographically, I was wondering if they're in Britannia. Where are they? No, they are above the clouds. They are above Britannia. He asks his grandson if he wants to fall off something called God's finger, which is evidently where they are, and go on a journey around the world. Percival, however, seems disinterested in this fact of traveling around the world and going off God's finger, which is his home. His grandfather points out a point in the sky where he says, this is the island of the Sky People, which if you have seen the movie of the Seven Deadly Sins, you remember the Sky People. And he points below them and says, this is where Britannia is. And that is where our heroes, Meliodas, all of them, that's where they've resided all this time from a previous story. The grandfather continues on about all the various places in this vast world and asks his grandson once again if he wants to explore all of these places now that he's 16. Percival then says, no, not really, and he asks his grandfather if you'd want to go fishing for these sky fish instead. So they fish off of this cliff into the clouds, and they catch fish from there. The next scene, it cuts to the night where they're eating fish they caught together, and the grandfather tells Percival that Percival's father went out on an adventure as soon as he turned 16. But Percival also asks, is that the same time period where his father died? Because he knows his father is not in his life, and to his understanding, his father died during these adventures that he went upon when he was 16. The grandfather asks if Percival gets lonely in this area because it's so sparse, it's just them two, no one else is there, but Percival tells him that he isn't because he is with his grandfather. He's with his grandfather. He's satisfied. He's not longing for anything else. It's really, 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 really touching. And while the grandfather is drinking during dinner, he mutters a phrase to himself, and the phrase goes like this. Those eyes see through evil, that mouth speaks the truth, that heart is filled with justice, that sword smashes evil. And Percival asks what this means because every time he drinks, he mutters this phrase, and the grandfather tells him it is simply a reminder. Possibly the grandfather in the past was some type of knight of some sort, and this is the phrase they possibly had, but as a result, we don't know at this current point. The grandfather then tells Percival that although Percival is still a kid, someday he'll have to defeat the evil and help the weak. And Percival, as if hearing this statement before, finishes the statement saying that he needs to become someone who protects and risks their life for something they hold dear. He smiles and tells his grandfather that whatever happens, he'll protect his grandfather no matter what. And of course, his grandfather says, I'm the one who should be protecting you. You're my grandson. I don't ever want to reach the point where you need to protect me. We then see Percival and his grandfather sleeping, and Percival wakes up to go look outside at the stars. During this time, he sits and thinks on all the places in the world his grandfather told him about, and suddenly screams he wants to go on an adventure, that he can't stay still any longer. What a switch up. During this time that he's running around, he trips and falls and passes out, and when he wakes up, there's a large mist in the surrounding area, and suddenly we see a man wearing plate armor with a sword sheathed on his side, sailing through the clouds towards him. The mysterious man tells him he's surprised to see him and his grandfather there, and is surprised to see that his bird had been shot down, and this bird was evidently a messenger. Once docking, he begins to walk towards the house, and he mentions that he never thought that this man would be living in the middle of nowhere. The knight asks him if he knows a man named Balgus, who we now know as Percival's grandfather, so now we know the grandfather's name, which is nice, so we can not just call him Grandpa. The man tells Percival that he has urgent business to be resolved and that they've known each other from a long time from being with the Holy Knight. So it seems that Balgus was previously a Holy Knight, possibly in Leonis. Could have been Camelot, but likely Leonis. The mysterious man mentions that Balgus is a cruel man for raising Percival while hiding the truth. And Percival begins to inspect the ship that this man sailed on, completely ignoring what he previously said. And while inspecting the ship, the man goes missing over the hill. We then see Balgus and the man make contact with each other, and the man notes that Balgus uses the sword honored by the Majesty as a kitchen knife and that nothing has changed with Balgus. Out of nowhere, they suddenly begin fighting and the house is immediately destroyed. The mysterious man tells him that it has been 16 years since they betrayed their master and fled, and that he was surprised to see him living so carefree in a remote land. Balgus corrects him and says that it was he who turned against them and that Balgus merely abandoned the whole situation. Suddenly during the fight, Balgus takes a magic attack to the stomach and it seemingly opened up his entire stomach and abdominal area. Percival, coming down from the hill, sees this and suddenly screams for them to stop. In doing so, this scream, when he's on the mountain, it begins to split the mountain apart, and the mysterious man tells him there is an order to everything and that Percival is next on this list. As Percival attacks the man, he seems to have good fighting skills, but everything Percival throws at him is destroyed due to the man's magic. He was throwing rocks, he's throwing everything he can to try to stop this man who's harmed his grandfather. Suddenly, Balgus begins to wrap up the man and strangle him. He puts his arms around this knight, and he tells Percival to run away, and he says that Balgus is fatally wounded due to this man's magic, but he feels he can still hold him off for Percival to escape. And suddenly this man uses magic and it splits the skin apart on Balgus and blood is just splattered everywhere. And a horrific scene in front of Percival. In an absolute shock, Percival stands there and has his chest split open as well due to the magic of this mysterious man. Percival in response stands there before punching the man straight in his stomach, but of course it did no damage to him. And Percival is immediately hit to the ground in response. As Balgus is on the ground, we learn that the man's name is Ironside, and he asks why he came to kill him now only after all these years, and Ironside explains that he heard a prophecy of the arrival of an existence that will lead his lord, King Arthur, to his doom. The King Arthur who was prophesied by Merlin to be the leader of the humans, and why does he have this prophecy that that King Arthur's gonna die? I have no idea. And the mysterious man refers to these individuals who will bring down King Arthur as the four knights of the apocalypse. And that took me by surprise personally, because to my understanding, the four knights of the apocalypse are our main characters' children from Seven Deadly Sins, plus including Percival. So why would they be the ones to bring down King Arthur? Has he become corrupt? I have no idea. So this definitely flips the story on its head from what we were told initially about the Four Knights of the Apocalypse regarding the story, and kind of makes it have a more ominous tone. And Ironside explains that he cannot be sure that Percival is not one of these four Knights of the Apocalypse, and that's why he has to kill him. The mysterious man walks away, leaving them on the ground, and we see Balgus tell his grandson that he is so sorry. And we then see Percival somehow stand up, somehow alive, apologizing, saying that he couldn't protect his grandfather and he's so sorry. He's saying all he wanted to do was protect his family, and his grandfather tells him from now he needs to find something to protect and find someone he can walk through life with who is worth protecting. Percival says this is punishment since he lied about something earlier. What he lied about was not wanting to go on an adventure. He didn't tell his grandfather this because he wanted his grandfather to feel like he was truly happy being there and didn't need anything else. And the grandfather also admits that he also lied. He said he wasn't disappointed that his grandson didn't want to go on an adventure, and in fact, he was touched and truly happy because his grandson wasn't lonely because he was with his grandfather. We then see the grandfather collapse to the floor, and Balgus asks his grandson how he was able to withstand that damage. Percival smiles and he tells his grandfather it's because he trained with him every single day. That's a really good tearjerker of a first chapter. Percival asks who that man was, and Balgus tells him that the man's name is Ironside and that he is Percival's father. What was referenced earlier is that Balgus left 16 years ago when he departed from Ironside. 16 years ago, in fact, Percival is exactly 16 years old. I feel like that's definitely a relation right there. It had something had to do with that, and it seems Balgus took Percival to safety. And Percival is in complete disbelief, and he starts asking how any of this is even possible. Balgus tells him that he has to find his father and ask him directly if he wants to know, and that from now on, he'll unfortunately be traveling alone. In this tear-jerking moment, we see the grandfather tell his grandson that he'll always be with him no matter what, and in front of Percival's very eyes, Balgus passes away. Percival, in immense grief, hugs his grandfather, and he hugs his helmet that his grandfather always wore, and he puts it on. From there, Percival's adventure began, to search for his grandfather's killer, who is his father, and uncover the hidden truth, to see the world that his grandfather told him about. All of these things his grandfather always told him about, these adventures, he can now go and do and honor his grandfather that way. The chapter ends here, and we see so much happen, and it's not remotely what I expected. I really thought what the first chapter would consist of would be Tristan, Lancelot, and the others, but we are introduced to the missing horseman of the four, who happens to somehow be the protagonist, who's unrelated to any of the characters we've seen previously, which is a very nice take by the author Suzuki. Percival's relationship with his grandfather was so pure and wholesome, and to see it taken before his very eyes by his own father for fear of a premonition towards King Arthur and Percival being one of the four knights is absolutely troublesome. I don't know where this story could go from here, but it already has such a dark tone. It's a compelling first chapter, and if y'all haven't read it, I advise to read it. It's a pretty long one, given that manga pilot chapters are typically a little bit longer, but definitely worth the read. I'm really excited to see where the story leads, and I'm such a big fanboy of everything in this world. The whole medieval section of this fantasy is just so phenomenal to me. And so as a result, I'll be covering all these chapters as they come out, and I'll keep you updated with any news throughout the series. And if you guys really enjoy this content and want to see more of it, I encourage you to please like, subscribe, and comment so y'all can see more of whenever I pump out this content. As y'all know, I've been upping my video frequency fairly heavily lately. It's been, I would say, two to three, possibly sometimes 4 videos a week, which has been, surpassed my goal of 1. So, as always, guys, I love making these videos for you, and I will catch you all next time.